My name is John Mirick. I'm currently a resident of Princeton. I grew up in Worcester, and as a young child participated in vegetable shows. In fact, I raised potatoes and got my ribbons every year for a number of years. Then, after going away to college and then law school, I moved back to Worcester in the mid-1970s, and after a few years here, back in Worcester, was asked to become a trustee. I became a trustee in 1983. If I remember correctly, Fred Roberts was the executive director. He'd just been hired, and then he was offered the opportunity to go head up Longwood Gardens. And unfortunately, we lost him, but we had John Trexler in his place, and John was the one who really pushed us to move from being a quiet little organization which did shows and exhibitions to being a horticultural center. When I was growing up as a child, and then actually as a young adult having moved back to the city, the Horticultural Society was on Elm Street. And what it mostly did were occasional exhibitions. We always went to the Spring Flower Show, which was neat, but it was very small because the building itself was quite small. My mother, I think, with the Worcester Garden Club, would do one of those exhibitions. I remember helping out when they decided the set that year should have a little garden house. And we had to find some old lumber and make a garden house facade so it would look in the set as if it were a weathered building that had been there forever. As soon as one show was over, they would sit down and say what worked, what didn't, what might we do next year. And a lot of effort went into creating a sense of atmosphere, walking into a comparatively small room and feeling that you were in a garden. I was then, I guess I still am, an attorney, and I had moved back to the city after graduating from Harvard Law School and practicing in Boston for 4 years. And as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Worcester, so moving back was a little bit like coming home and getting involved in various civic activities. I was on the, we call it, it's now called Preservation Worcester. Back then it was the Worcester Heritage Preservation Society. And so I went on that board, and there was a lot of overlap among various civic organizations. So if you were involved with the Art Museum or Heritage Worcester or those kinds of groups, you got to know people, and I was asked whether I would be interested in becoming a trustee of the Horticultural Society. I think my mother was at that point not a trustee, but she was involved in some of the various garden committees. And so in 1983, I was elected as a trustee and continued as a trustee for, at least 3 terms, and then I became a vice president. One of the things that I did as an attorney as we were making the move here to Tower Hill was to update the bylaws. And one of the things that we put in the bylaws were term limits. So I guess you could say I wrote into the bylaws at the end of when I would become an officer. Well, it was a period of transition. Fred Roberts started it, and then John Trexler picked it up. I distinctly remember John at one of our meetings saying to us, "You're at a decision point. Are you going to continue to be in this little building, which is a nice little building, and putting on exhibitions 4 or 5 times a year, or do you want to move and become a real horticultural center, a botanic garden? It was a several-year process. First, we had to say, let's look into it. Then we appointed a site selection committee. My recollection is we looked at least a dozen sites, and they ranged from in the city of Worcester to surrounding communities. It became more than a small committee could do. So we, I think, created 4, I don't know if we called them subcommittee at the time, but 4 groups that each had responsibility to look at 3 or 4 sites each. And actually, my recollection is we were in serious discussions with Clark University over Hadwin Park, and thought that might be good. There were people on the board who said we ought to stay in Worcester, and that would have the advantage of being in Worcester. On the other hand, it was a much smaller site. When we were close to thinking that was where we were going to go, the trustees of reservations mentioned to us this site. And again, a little bit of one of those, there's a lot of networking. I was an attorney doing some of the work for the trustees of reservations, although I wasn't involved in that particular suggestion. Then the more we looked at it out here, the better it seemed to be. And I think it was late 1985 that we actually signed a purchase and sale agreement. So call it the better part of 2 years after looking. Looking back, it's pretty clear that one of the milestones was first developing the master plan, and then the first building that was put up. And before that, it was pretty clear that's where we were going to go. But that really turned the concepts into something you could see and touch and feel. The exhibitions that are held are certainly a tie back to the past, but they draw many more people and many more exhibitors and participants than we ever had at Horticultural Hall. But I think that's an evolution that we may not have thought of back in the 1980s when we made the move, that the exhibitions would grow in scope. And we now do here exhibitions far beyond what were ever done at Horticultural Hall. But that's a great tie back to that era. Frankly, I don't think visitors pay any attention to the move. I think they're in the moment and they're admiring what's here. Hopefully they go away with a sense of, gee, that's something I could do in my own garden. And even if they don't come with that in mind, I think they all go away with, what a great way to have spent an afternoon or a day. That's an easy one. You know, all you have to do is look at the number of people who come and where they come from, and even the way the name has changed over time. We're a destination, and I think that if you could get other trustees who were involved in making the move back from the 1980s, I think to a person we would all say, this has succeeded beyond our wildest expectations.